Hi everybody, and welcome to the channel where Doge reads stories of D&D cringe for your listening pleasure. In today's episode of Dungeons & Dragons Horror Stories, we have a tale about a DM that constantly berates a player just for using their abilities. A story about what happens when that guy doesn't get the rise out of the DM that they were looking for, and much more. But first, this chart shows that a lot of you watching aren't yet subscribed, and to that, I just ask,
Why?
So be sure to click that subscribe button and the notification bell today. But with that said, let's get right into the stories. DM makes negative remarks about my character every session. By Reddit user, Throwaway from a Rogue. I've been playing D&D with a specific group online for a little over a year now. We've successfully completed a campaign together, a short homebrew, and another campaign that we cancelled and scrapped to do Witchlight instead, once that released. The group has a few people who have shown interest in DMing, which is always fun rotating them every campaign, so everyone gets a chance to both play and DM. The DM for this campaign, Daniel, is taking that role for the first time. It's been mostly fun, but he always makes negative comments about my character. And recently, it's been every single session. It's starting to make me feel dejected, and as if I'm not wanted in the group. For a bit of context, I have both anxiety and ADHD, so maintaining focus and being involved heavily in the roleplay side of D&D is a huge struggle for me. I try to make up for this by thinking really hard about my characters themselves. I always play characters who have significant input and are heavy hitters in combat, and spend lots of time working on background stories and lore for the DM to work with if they choose to. If they do or don't, it's up to them. I'm super relaxed with it. I'm playing a fighter beastmaster at the moment, and I've been considering multi-classing into rogue, since DM allows multi-classes. We also asked questions in session 0 if there would be any bans on specific feats, and he said no, but he would appreciate if we didn't take lucky, since last campaign, I think 4 other players all took it. I've built my fighter to be an offensive tank in combat. I have mobile, so I can move around and attack multiple enemies, or come to an ally's aid and set up flanking for the next turn. I have Sentinel too, to get extra damage in with a reaction, potentially saving squishier players like our rogue and caster from fatal damage, or stopping a fleeing enemy. For Beastmaster options, I have Riposte for the same reason, just to get extra damage in when needed. I also have Sweeping Attack and Precision Attack. I usually use my rapier as my main weapon, and then offhand with a scimitar, or dual-wield scimitars depending on flavor. My fighter wears his weapons on him at all times, so it was agreed as a group that weapon switching is a free action. Whenever I attack, plus offhand, plus superiority die, he always complains like, "Got anything else? No reaction? No action surge?" sarcastically, even when he's aware that I've used those abilities. At first, I put up with it because I just assumed it was DM's frustration, now and again, with my character excelling in combat, so that I understood. One thing has always bothered me though. There's 3 other party members just as strong in combat, if not stronger. A ranger fighter with sharpshooter, a high damage rogue, and a cleric with untouchable AC. Not once has he complained about them, only me. In the last couple of weeks, we hit level 5, so I finally got that sweet second attack per action. I proceeded to attack 2 times, offhand, and action surge for attack 2 times again. He wasn't a fan, and when I used Sentinel in the same turn, I think that was his boiling point. In the session last night, I couldn't even get 5 words into my turn before he cut me off and started talking over me. It's hard for me to deal with because it cuts my focus and I lose my train of thought and forget things, like adding superiority die damage after marking off the die as used. Whenever I say, "That's my turn done," he always snaps back, "Are you sure? Don't you have a reaction? 50 more attacks?" I have explained that it's literally just my class, and I'm making use of what's available to me. I've also explained why I make combat-oriented characters to him multiple times, and opened up discussion, but nothing. I really wish DM would just learn to deal with it, or private message me to make a compromise on my character. Combat is the one thing I'm good at, and his comments make me feel like I'm wrong for enjoying that and using all of my abilities. It makes the sessions feel like a chore rather than something to look forward to. I really enjoy this group. I just don't know if this guy is the best at handling things as a DM. I would love some outside perspective. Well, it sounds to me like this DM either has the DM versus party mentality, or he just has some sort of problem with OP, and is taking it out on them while playing. I say the DM versus party part because the clashing only happens when OP is in a fight and using their abilities. Though, like OP said, the other characters do as much, if not more damage, so there might be some out-of-character stuff too. Perhaps it's just because the amount of rolling OP is doing as a fighter. Which, in all fairness, fighters are built like that, especially in later levels. The only way to know for sure is to have a talk with the DM about what is going on, though it sounds like OP has already tried that via private messages, but never got a response. The next course of action would be to talk to the other players and ask them to say something as well. That way, you could bring it up during the game and hash things out that way. If none of those work, then I would just leave. D&D is supposed to be fun, and the way that DM is acting is doing nothing but bringing stress to OP. Though, those are just my thoughts. What do y'all think? Let's move on to the next one. Creepy First Time DM Destroys a Campaign by Reddit user Zilkin. I want to start by saying that none of us are experienced players, but we all decided to give it a try. The DM for the first couple of sessions was my cousin, and he did a good job. We were all having fun, and I built a hobbit rogue that was pretty strong. Every team fight, I think I would do the most damage due to sneak attacks and crits I would get fairly often. I noticed one of the players, my other cousin and DM's brother, started to get jealous of my character because he never seemed to do well in encounters, and he would often complain about his character whenever my character did something. He built some new wizard class, I think Psychic, but I'm not sure, that wasn't very strong at level 1. After a couple of sessions, our current DM got a bit tired and said that he wanted to play as a player instead, and his brother offered to be the new DM, though he never did it before. We would all keep our characters and just go on another adventure. Anyway, the new DM made his wizard character an NPC, who was, for some reason, now overpowered and all knowledgeable, and was the main quest giver for our party. Of course, his NPC showed up in a tavern wearing a cloak, his face hidden in the shadows. My female coworker immediately recognized that he was just playing his wizard character and trying to be cool, but he tried denying it was him until he admitted it, since it was obvious to everyone. He wanted that to be a big reveal for later. The details of the story I don't remember, but for some reason we had to stop another powerful wizard from doing something by infiltrating his mansion and stealing some document. The mansion was in some wizard street where only the most powerful wizards lived, and by his description, they were all bastards, rich in all things material and arcane, hedonists, and very dangerous. Also, they had sex slaves. His logic was, if you could do whatever you want by using magic, how long before you start indulging yourself? To make things worse, the wizard we were supposed to rob was a pedophile, with child slaves locked in his dungeon. I noticed my female coworker was uncomfortable with this fact, as well as most of the table, but my cousin DM seemed oblivious to that. To make a long story short, I climb into the wizard's room because I'm a hobbit rogue, and try to find the letter that we are stealing. The wizard, of course, catches me, and the DM says, he thinks you are one of his child slaves, but he isn't sure. So, for 30 minutes, I had to roleplay to seduce the wizard into drinking some sleeping drug we put into the wine, while the rest of the party was bored, since this was only between me and the DM. After I managed on persuasion, the wizard drinks the wine, and the DM started to physically act the scene out by spinning around the room, putting his hand on his forehead, and screaming, "Foul play!" Anyway, he falls asleep, and I stole the thing and we all escaped. The DM asked us, "Aren't you going to save the children or kill the wizard?" To which we said, let's just move on, because nobody wanted to keep on playing this scenario anymore. Later, in the tavern, the DM wanted us to go and have a drink, especially my female coworker, who had to decline several times. The DM was creepily suggesting she might have some fun in the tavern, but she kind of figured out what kind of fun the DM had in mind. After we all went to sleep, the next morning rolls around, and we are ambushed by that pedo wizard and his gang. The pedo wizard casts polymorph self and transforms into a huge ogre with a quote-unquote huge bat, and then points at my character and screams, "Frodo, I am here to fuck you!" The DM was the only one having fun and laughing, and no one else at the table thought this was funny. The DM said to us, "You have to beat these guys or else you are fucked, literally." We managed to beat the encounter, and after that session, we never played again. My theory is, the DM got jealous of my Hobbit character when he was a player. Then, as revenge, when he started his first DM session, he wanted to sexually assault my character with an ogre, and made a whole quest around that. Yeah, I don't blame the players for not wanting to play with that DM anymore. And I think OP's thinking is correct, that this session was designed as some sort of revenge plot against his character. The DM probably intended the whole Frodo fucking thing to be at the mansion, but when the party decided not to try to kill the pedo wizard, which, yikes, he decided that he would just throw it at them in the tavern the next day in game. It was probably for the best that they never continued playing with this DM. Let's move on. Awful Session Turned into Revenge Hilarity by Reddit user Storytime. I once ran a one-shot where my players started as maroon pirates trying to steal a ship and escape from a dinosaur-infested island. Arr, mateys. Well, there were 4 players, 3 of which are experienced that I know from previous campaigns, and the 4th I didn't. 4 decided he was going to play the stereotypical that guy rogue edgelord role that every DM knows and dreads, and try to sabotage every possible plan, and on top of that, steal from the players. 2 hours of horror ensues. He kills the NPC trying to help them escape. He tries to get a dinosaur to eat a player so he can take his stuff, etc., etc. But I don't worry or swing the DM big dick around, because I know the capabilities of the other 3 players to deal with the stereotypical bullshit McEdgelord. After 2 hours, they reach the shore, where a group of pirates are hanging out to poach some dinos and get back home. Upon approaching, the pirates are hostile, and the party leader, aka the only person who has any charisma, convinces them to stand down and duel the party fighter for passage on the ship and to join their crew. Besting the pirate brawler easily, the party is accepted into their ranks and boards the ship. Once again, McEdgelord tries to steal our party leader's loot while he sleeps. He catches him in the act and argues with him about continuously stealing from the party, rousing all crew members on board. After, the party leader challenges McEdgelord to a duel. He laughs and accepts, being an invincible rogue and all, and the crew surround them on board to witness the duel. Well, combat begins, and party leader wins the initiative check. I know it's over at that point, because he's a sorcerer, and sure enough, a single hold person spell does the trick, and McEdgelord is down for the count. 1 turn later, he's casually kicked overboard to his inevitable death by drowning. McEdgelord gets mad and leaves. The other 3 players laugh, and the rest of the night is spent pirating the seas with no more McEdgelord. Now, while I'm usually a proponent of talking about player behavior out of game to try to fix issues within a game, in this case, I make an exception. When a new person joins a group and immediately starts doing that guy's stuff to people he don't know, that is a huge red flag. And the DM had enough confidence in his players to know that they could handle this problem player in game, and they proceeded to prove him right. And before we get into the last story of the day, remember to like the video if you're enjoying it, as it really does help. And to help entice you further, here's some classic Lucky. Now, let's get into the story. A troll player tries his best to annoy me. By Reddit user, Cruel Destiny. In my first campaign, I had not one, but 2 problem players. I already talked about the first most prominent one, but had a second one roughly midway through. Had a player that ended up leaving due to some strange miscommunication, and I wanted to keep my party of players rounded at 4, so I started looking for more people. Hardly anyone wanted to join this time, so I took in a promising player who had a little experience at D&D and seemed like fun. Well, he was fun, just not as I'm sure he intended. Let's call this player Joe. Now, when Joe came into the game, I gave him a quick summary of the world, a basic rundown of the rules, and helped build his character when asked. He wanted to be a female kobold. Sure, this is fine. He picked wizard, rolled stats, and everything was perfectly fine and normal. I was quite looking forward to having a player-controlled kobold in the party. Then things started getting weird. When I asked about what character portrait he wanted to use, he sends me this absolute gaudy and definitely Rule 34 variation of some fan art of a kobold. Okay, sure. I'm not one to judge. I just give him the character portrait after cropping it a bit. I'm showing him the table as we play on Tabletop Simulator, and have him select a seat. I ask if there was anything he wanted to personalize that part of the table, like note cards, dice tower, or dice box, and what color dice he preferred. Though he asks if I can place a mat with some art, and I tell him, alright, just send me the art. Joe then sends me a full picture of an overly colorful, very silly, and far too lewd looking art piece of another kobold. Think of the meme, paint me like one of your French girls. I'm at a bit of a loss for words, but just think to myself, to each their own, I guess. Then comes game night. The party is investigating in a desert town, trying to find clues on the whereabouts of a city hidden in the sands, and Joe starts doing silly things. Though it was nothing out of the ordinary for a joke character, he was just being annoyingly silly with the NPCs, often trying to flirt with the NPCs and player characters alike, or attempting to start a fight that the other player characters defuse or outright stop before it starts. He then says that he's going to cast Control Weather. Okay. I look up the spell, check the casting time, and tell him it's going to take a bit to cast. But he says that's fine, and I think nothing else of it. He casts the spell successfully and makes it a torrential rain, so I begin to describe how the little town near an oasis, in a desert, is suddenly beset by an unexpected rainfall, which started to make the city sink, as I had a cavern system under the city. The other players worked together to try to evacuate the citizens, with Joe's character having already bolted the scene. After all is said and done, the city is mostly sunken into the sands, and Joe is proud of himself. I laughed at the absurdity of the situation, but I was proud of how the other players handled it. I end up having to call the game early due to real-life shenanigans, but I come back later on to find that Joe had left the server without a word. I guess not getting to either embarrass or anger me or the players had failed. Well, it certainly sounds like that player was just trying to get a reaction from OP or the other players. Either that, or that's just the way he was. But with the sending of kobold porn to the DM, and actively trying to destroy everything in their path in game, I think that he was just trying to see how far he could push it. I guess he wasn't happy with the results though, so he left. But that's going to do it for today. If you have a story that you would like to be read in a video, be sure to post it to the d&Ddoge subreddit. And as always, I appreciate all of you, and may all of your rolls be natural 20s. Until next time.